Hello and welcome to Adobe Photoshop CS2 and my tutorial on the Colour Replacement tool. Now the Colour Replacement tool comes to us in the form of a brush and can be accessed from the Tools palette over here on the left hand side. The Colour Replacement tool was first seen in Photoshop Elements and is now also found in Photoshop CS2, sharing the same button as the brush and pencil tools. You can also use the B key on the keyboard, which scrolls through the brush, pencil and colour replacement tools. Now just to explain what we're going to be doing here, up on the screen I've got a photograph of my sister's car, and just in case you wanted to know, it's a Ford Puma, and we're simply going to change the colour of the car using the colour replacement tool. So with the colour replacement tool selected, let's take a look at what options we have for adjusting the tool. Now as we said, we're using a variant of the brush tool, so the first option we get is brush size. If we click the downward facing arrow, it will reveal the brush setting dialog box. Now I'm going to set the size of the brush as we're going along, so I'll leave that option alone for a second, but I'm going to have to make sure I'm using a fairly hard brush with the smallest spacing setting, which is 1%. The next option is the blending mode, and if you're up to speed with the HSB colour mode, you'll find these a lot easier to understand. HSB being hue, which is the actual colour, saturation, which is the intensity of the colour, and brightness, which is the luminosity value. So if we use the hue mode, we'll just be affecting the colour and not the luminosity or brightness values. If we switch to the saturation mode, we'll affect the intensity of the colour but not the colour itself or the brightness. And if we use the colour mode, we'll affect the hue and saturation but not the brightness. And finally, by using the luminosity mode, we'll be affecting the brightness value but not the actual colour or saturation. Generally you'll find that the hue, or more commonly used colour mode, is going to be more useful, and in today's exercise I'm going to use the colour blending mode. The next three icons we have are the sampling modes, and this just lets Photoshop determine which colours we're replacing. This can be set to either continuous, once, or background swatch. The difference I'll explain in just a few moments. Next we have the limits of the brush, and this determines which pixels inside the brush area we're going to replace. Discontinuous will replace all pixels inside the brush area, whilst contiguous will only replace pixels which are connected to the area you're sampling, so it won't jump across edges to replace colours which fall inside the tolerance value you've set. The Find Edges option works like contiguous, but tries even harder to maintain edge detail inside an image. We also have an anti-aliasing option, which smooths the appearance of replaced pixels. And finally we have a tolerance value, which I've found can be the difference between a good or bad colour replacement. I'm going to go ahead and show you how this works. So if I go down to my foreground colour and click the icon to reveal the colour picker, and what we're going to do here is select a colour to effectively paint the car with. And it may be helpful if we do this with the HSB controls. So in the hue field we want to enter a value of 60, which is measured in degrees, as this particular value is based on the standard colour wheel. We want to add a saturation of 100% and then a brightness value of 100%, and we'll click OK. Now we can zoom in just a touch and get the size of our brush about right. We can do that by using the bracket keys, or we can change the brush size like I showed you before. Now we're going to make sure our sampling is set to once and that we're using the Find Edges setting, and I'm going to set the tolerance value to 100% and start brushing away on the paintwork below the window. Now you can see that we're getting some of the rubber seal around the window, and that's because we're selecting too many pixels, meaning we've got our tolerance value set too high. If I go ahead and set a tolerance of 1%, you can see that we're now not getting enough pixels. So whilst we know from what we're doing here that it can be tricky to get the right tolerance value selected, you can see just how important it is in order to select the right pixels for replacement. Now I'm going to select a tolerance of about 50% and give that a go, and you can see that that's just about right. I will say though at this stage that we're working with a pretty complicated area, so you'll need to be able to change the tolerance value during the colour replacement process itself. Now if we take a closer look at the brush, you'll see a small X in the middle, and that's where the sampling comes in. We're going to set it to once up here, and that means that the colour I want to replace will be sampled once when I first click the brush, and it will only of course be the colour directly underneath the cross. The continuous sampling mode means that as you drag the brush, you continuously resample the colour that you want to replace. The background swatch option allows you to only change colours that are the same as your predefined background colour, which is set down here by clicking the background icon. Now don't be afraid to experiment with the tool, as it does take a while to get the feel of how it works. And I'd recommend you brush in small amounts at a time, so that then if you make a mistake you can just hit Ctrl Z to undo your last move and not have to lose lots of work. Now I'm just going to brush away in the door area to replace the original colour with my selected colour. Also, you'll need to get into the habit of changing your brush size as you work, and that makes it far easier to get into those small areas. And you can see in this area here we need to use a small brush to paint the colour as accurately as possible. Okay, now I'm going to forward the project about 10 minutes and bring up an almost finished version of the image. Now I just wanted to demonstrate how we can paint back in details that we didn't want to lose in the first place. And a great example is this light cluster at the back of the car. Now say I've accidentally painted it yellow, which I have of course, but I don't like it, so I want to bring back the original colours. And a great way of doing that is by using the history brush tool over here in the tools palette. The shortcut is Y on the keyboard incidentally. Now with this tool selected, we need to select a history state to paint back in, and we do that by bringing over our history palette and making sure in the first history state we have the source for the history brush selected by clicking this icon here. Now any touching up that we do will replace what's currently on the screen with what's selected as a source point in the history palette. So if I start brushing away inside this light cluster, we're going to bring back our original pixels. So I'm going to zoom out, and here's the original photograph, and here's our finished photograph with a little bit of work from our colour replacement tool and the history brush tool. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Thanks very much for watching.